presentation. Okay. And the reason that I say that, you guys, is, and I'll share a little bit about me and who I am. I came out of the medical field, you guys, and I spent 21 years in the medical field working 12-hour days, sometimes 16-hour days, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 12 hours a day, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, 16-hour days, you guys. And I knew I was a good person. I always meant well. I knew that there was more for me, but I just didn't have the right information. I was making good money, my wife and I. My wife worked in property management. I worked in the medical field, you guys, and we made well over, $200,000 a year. But because we didn't understand how money worked, right? Because we didn't understand what to do with the dollar, we made $200,000 a year, but we had $200,000 a year bills. Okay. Can anybody relate to that, right? Right? There was still too much month at the end of the money. Okay. And at one point, I really, really remember one point in time looking at my wife and I said, you know what? Enough's enough. I call it my day of disgust. And those of you who are not muted, go ahead and mute your lines really quickly as we move forward. But we call it the day of disgust, right? And the day of disgust is simply that day where, hey, you say, listen, enough's enough. I gotta figure this thing out. I gotta figure this money thing out. I gotta figure this income thing out. And you guys, for me, that was about 3 short years ago. And I was introduced to this information when I got to our Infinite Company, and it changed my life. Okay. And one thing that I'm going to promise you all, okay, I'm going to give you guys a promise here tonight. In the event that you've never heard this before, I promise you, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. Okay. I'm going to say that one more time. In the event that you've never heard this before, I promise you that you are not going to hear this anywhere else. Okay. And I'm so confident in that, you guys, because I've been in the rooms of all these different financial agencies. I've been in the rooms of all these different IMOs. And, you guys, have never heard anything like this wealth formula. And so, I'm going to get into it, okay? But one of the questions that I want to ask everybody here tonight, okay? And just put a one in the chat, okay? If you guys um believe that most Americans, okay, do not understand how money works, okay? How many of you guys would agree that most Americans do not understand how money works? By show of hands. Show of hands or put a one in the chat for me really quickly. All right. Okay. And so with that said, you guys, okay, one of the important questions or one of the most important reasons that is, okay, because I'm sure some of you guys, I can't see you guys anymore, but I'm sure most of you guys understand or agree that most Americans do not understand what to do with the dollar and how money works, right? And so, give me one second. Let me get back to my screen here. Okay. Most of you guys would agree that most Americans don't understand how money works. And the reason that is for us is because of something very, very simple. It's called financial literacy. All right. Financial literacy. Okay. How we shape the world around us is by the words that we use. In fact, the only difference between the word world and the word word is an L. Okay. Words shape our world. Okay. And because words shape our world, right? Give me one second here. Because words shape our world, okay? Um, because we never had the language, or because no one ever really taught us what to do with a dollar or how money worked, most of us end up in the 3% bracket. Okay, how many of you guys understand what the 97% bracket, excuse me, and ostracized from the 3%? Okay, so statistically 97% of the population is poor. And it used to be middle class and poor, but because there are millionaires and billionaires now, Noah, right? We are being marginalized more and more every day. And so, what used to be considered a middle class income bracket is now actually considered poor. What do I mean by that? If I'm making less than $100,000 a year in the United States of America, in most states, okay, I am classified as poor. Okay, I am one paycheck away from being out on the streets. All right. And why is that? Because of something, as I mentioned, as simple as financial literacy. All right. And so, what is the importance of financial literacy? Okay. I know some of you guys grew up like I did. Okay. Where, my parents, they struggled. My parents were survivors. All right. I'm the youngest of six. I grew up in Oakland, California. Okay. Where I'm from, okay, most people told me to go to school, get good grades, and get a good job. How many of you guys ever heard that before? Go to school, get good grades, get a good job. Okay. Right. But in this capitalist society that we live in, okay, a good job is where you start, it's not where you finish. That's why it's called the corporate ladder and not the corporate bed. All right. It's not called the corporate bed. It's actually called the corporate ladder. And it's called the corporate ladder for a reason, because it's where you start and not where you finish. How many of you guys have ever heard of this one? We call this poverty language. Okay. When you find a good job, keep it. Anybody? Right? I was told that as well. That's why at 21 years old, when I got a job in the medical field, okay, I thought that I had arrived. Okay, I had settled into a $21 an hour career that I plan to leverage my way into wealth. Okay, and it wasn't until later I found out you cannot work your way to wealth. How many of you guys have heard money's the root of all evil? Okay. The rich are robbing the poor. Money doesn't buy happiness. I tell you what. Okay. I found some money in my pocket the other day. I was pretty happy. All right. Because it's not money that makes you happy, but it's what you're able to do with it. Money's a resource and a tool. Okay. How many guys ever heard they don't pay much? The rich should pay more taxes. Things have gotten really expensive. These are all common belief systems that dominate the 97%. Is this making sense to you guys so far? Show of hands. All right. Absolutely. Now let's look at the wealth side of the conversation. All right. Go to school, get good grades, and start a business. All right. You see the difference? Go to school, get good grades, and start a business, not get a good job. All right. A job is a good place to start, but not a good place to finish. As I mentioned to you guys earlier, it's called the corporate ladder and not the corporate bed. All right. It says money isn't everything, but it ranks right up there with oxygen. Right? I got that from my friend Zig Ziglar. How many of you guys familiar with Zig Ziglar, by the way? Right? Zig Ziglar is a phenomenal coach on business. If you haven't listened to any Zig Ziglar stuff, go on YouTube today, tomorrow, download as much Zig Ziglar as you can possibly download, because he's got some of the most profound wealth building philosophies that you will ever hear. Okay? Money is best exchanged for experiences and not things, is what wealthy people say. Isn't that a very significant difference between the 97% and the 3%, right? Because the 97% is saying, hey, my money doesn't buy things, my money buys experiences, right? And wealthy people also say, hey, don't work for money, teach your money to work for you. And you guys, all of these things were very foreign to me. Okay. All of these wealth building concepts, I was not raised with this kind of language. And 97% of the population is under the same, what we call spell, right? Spell. Spell. There's a reason the word spell and words are spelled, okay, by with letters because our words cast a spell over our lives. Okay, and if we don't have the right language that shapes our reality, okay, we end up living in the world that our words create. Okay, so write this down. Okay, those of you who are seeing this for the first time, our words shape our reality. The number one cause or the number one reason that most of us or most people are in the 97% bracket is because of a lack of financial literacy. All right. And in the words of my mentor, JT, okay, James Tolliver, he was a great mentor of mine. He said, Suni, the reason that you're broke, okay, I showed up 21 years old, broke, okay, destitute. I was pitiful. He said, Suni, you're not broke because you lack skill. You're broke because you are disconnected from your inability to think for yourself. Okay? He said, because of how we were raised, okay, in common society, okay, 5 years old to the time I graduate, to the time I go get a job, I'm told to wake up at a certain time, be at school at a certain time, take lunch at a certain time, go do my homework or come home at a certain time. Then when I go into the corporate world, corporate America, the W 2 space, okay, I'm well indoctrinated to, allow someone else to do the thinking for me. But watch this, the person that does the thinking for you also dictates and determines your destiny. I'm going to say this one more time. The person that does the thinking for you, Suni, dictates and determines your destiny. Okay? So he said, Suni, you're not broke because you lack skill or ambition. You're broke because your thinking is broken. And that's what the word broke actually means. It doesn't have nothing to do with your pockets. It has everything to do with your thinking. And this is where it really changed for me. He says, Suni, it's only two relationships that you can ever have with money. You're either mastering money or money is mastering you. There is no in between. Okay. You're either mastering money or money's mastering you. There is no in between. How many of you guys put a one in the chat real quick if you guys ever read a book called The Richest Man in Babylon? In fact, I think I have it here around me. Okay. Anybody ever read the book The Richest Man in Babylon, by the way? Okay, great book. Okay, that book talks about how this young man who grew up in a very impoverished kingdom became one of the wealthiest people in Babylon at the time by teaching his money how to go to work, how to master his money. There were people in his town that were more talented than him. There were people who were more ambitious, people who were more skilled, but he understood how to master money. Okay? In the words of Jim Rohn said, if you want to be happy, study happiness, right? If you want to be at peace, study peace. And if you want to earn more income or if you want to be wealthy, study money. Right? Okay? But so many of us, right? We're wondering why we're at odds with money, why we have this averse relationship with money, but we've never given it a good study. Okay? So, my suggestion to you all before we go into the wealth formula is understand there's only two relationships with money that you can have. You're either mastering money or money's mastering you. And in a capitalist society like the United States of America, not having financial literacy is like being in China and not speaking Mandarin. Okay? I tell kids all the time, Noah, okay, when I'm teaching this to the kids in the schools that I go to, okay, I ask them, are you taking a second language course? And they say, yes. I say, what are you taking? They say, well, I'm taking French. Other kids are saying, I'm taking Spanish. I say, well, what is your first language? And they say, English. And I say, no, it's not. It's finance. In America, your first language is finance. Your second language is English. Because in a capitalist society, okay, if you don't have financial literacy, okay, you are at a disadvantage. All right. And so Moving right along, a great question to ask ourselves if we want to better understand, okay, how money works and what to do with the dollar. Okay, I always say you cannot get empowering answers by asking disempowering questions. All right, so sometimes it's not about the answers we get, but it's about the questions we ask. Okay, so my mentor told me, he said, Suni, okay, do you even understand what wealth actually is? Okay. And I used to think that wealth, riches, being rich and being wealthy was all the same. All right. Okay. But wealth, you guys, is a byproduct of money making money for you. And when I understood that, okay, I thought back to when my mother used to say, hey, son, you got to stop asking me for so much money. You think money grows on trees, don't you? Anybody ever heard that from their mom, or am I the only one? All right. Money doesn't grow on trees. You got to stop asking me for so much money. Okay. But what my mother didn't understand was money actually does grow on trees when you understand that money is both the seed and the harvest. The problem is, okay, we've only been taught the consumer side of money, but we were never taught the sowing side of money. We've only been taught the reap side of money, but never the sow side of money. Okay. See, there's this little book that I read called the Bible. All right. Anybody familiar with that book? All right. And God says in that book, okay, be fruitful, subdue, and have dominion. Why is God describing man as a fruit? Well, what is the definition of a fruit? A fruit is a living organism whose seed is within itself. Right? That's why if you guys go to the grocery store these days and your fruit don't have seeds, it's not real. Don't buy it, okay? It's manufactured. All right? It's another conversation for another day. But a fruit, the definition of a fruit is a living organism whose seed is within itself. So God is describing man as a fruit, says be fruitful. Okay? But let me ask you this. Can money reproduce itself? Yes, money can reproduce itself. So money is both seed and fruit. So we have to figure out how to get on both sides of the deal. All right. We got to get on the harvest side, but we also have to get some sowing going. All right, you guys. So let's talk about this thing called the wealth formula. Guys, please write this down, take a picture. All right, the wealth formula is time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation and taxes equals wealth. Okay, I'm going to say this one more time because it blew me away how simple this formula was. When I first got hold of this information, I was like, oh my God, this is so good because it's so simple. Time plus capital plus rate of return minus inflation and taxes equals wealth. Now, notice that time comes before capital. I used to think when I was a kid, okay, I used to hear the word capital all the time, had no idea what capital actually was. But I found out as I became more financially literate that money has a different name according to its form and function. Okay. Money has a different form according to a different name according to its form and function, which means that it is a living entity. That's why they call it currency. It has a vibration. All right. So capital actually has a first name. It's actually called working capital. So time plus working capital, your money at work plus rate of return minus inflation and taxes equals wealth. So let's get into these five pillars of the wealth formula. Number one, okay, we're going to talk about time. You guys, time, I always say, is the primary reason for wealth creation. Please write that down. Okay, time is the primary reason for wealth creation. We are all exchanging time for money in hopes that we will get to a point where we're exchanging less time for more money. How many of you guys, by show of hands or put a one in the chat, would agree? Okay, this is why one day we retire. Okay, because we are hoping over a 40-year time span, we've accumulated enough of a nest egg to get our time back. Okay. We used to call a job back in the days when I was coming up into this type of industry. We used to call it the 40 40 and 40 plan. Anybody familiar with that language? The 40 40 and 40 plan, where you work 40 hours a week, okay, for 40 years to retire off of 40% of what you made. All right. Back in the day, when people retired, especially if they had a pension, okay, they would give you a watch. And do you know what the watch was symbolic of? Your employer giving you your time back. Anybody ever heard I retired with a watch and a pension? Okay. It was symbolic of your employer giving you your time back. So all of us are looking, whether we realize it or not, you guys, it is innate to who we are. Okay, to get back our time. We're all looking to exchange a lot less time for a lot more value. So, time is actually a form of currency that we're leveraging. So let's talk about it. Okay, I'm going to talk about this time component by introducing you all to two people you all know very well, actually, Mr. Start Early and Mr. Start Late. Hey, Mr. Start Early, okay? Mr. Start Late, they come to a webinar like this one, and Mr. Start Early, he is super excited. He is psyched. He's like, oh my God, Mr. Start Late, okay? That was so good. I'm gonna start putting away about $300 a month. That's $3,600 a year at an 8% interest rate. Now, for my younger people on the call, okay, I want you to look at the $3,600 as seed, and I want you to look at the 8% as soil. Following me? All right. Now, Mr. Start Early starts at 25 years old. He's super excited. He's like, listen, I'm going to get some sowing going. All right. And so he's starting to sow some seeds in really good soil at 8% interest rate. All right. Now, what's very interesting is Mr. Start Early, by the time he's 32, he's no longer leveraging his seed or his principal or his money for a rate of return. He's now leveraging this big empty spot called time. All right. He's now leveraging time. And what's very interesting is, okay, is that, let me go back real quick. I'm sorry, guys. There we go. What's very interesting is, okay, Mr. Start Early has about $37,467, okay, by the time he's 32. Mr. Start Late says, hey, they're at a game of basketball or something. They're young guys, 32 years old. He says, you're still doing that thing where you're saving $300. How's that working for you? He said, I'm glad you asked. He pulls out his phone. He says, I got about $37,467. Mr. Starlay says, oh my God, is it too late for me to get started? Get it? Because his name's Mr. Start Late. He does everything late. Okay. Mr. Start Early says, matter of fact, no, it is not too late for you to get started. Mr. Start Late says, you know what? I'm going to get started the same $300. The same $300. I'm going to sow that at an 8% interest rate too. Now, even more interesting is that by the time, okay, they're both 48 years old. Mr. Start Early's got about $128,367. All right. While Mr. Start Late got about $131,221. Mr. Start Late says, wow, it's pretty interesting that I got more than you and you started before me. And Mr. Start Early says, no, 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 you missed the point. He said, see, the reason that I started early was because I only needed to invest $25,200 while you invested $61,200. I leveraged more time and less capital. You leveraged more capital and less time. You've got more money than me on paper, but I have more money than you net. Okay. So, what is the caveat here, you guys? Okay. When it comes to the time component and growing our wealth, a 6 year difference cost Mr. Start Late a $35,000 to $36,000 difference in income on the back end. The less capital, the more capital you have, the more time you have, excuse me, the less capital required And the less time you have, the more capital required. This is why time is a very important piece to the wealth formula. This is why we do $1 million baby presentation. This is why we want to talk to families about putting their children in position because they get to be Mr. Start early. Okay? Hope this makes sense to somebody. Okay? So now let's talk about, okay, let's talk about rate of return. Okay, we talked about time, we talked about capital, working capital. Now let's talk about rate of return. All right, anybody ever heard of the rule of 72? Anybody out there heard of the rule of 72? Show of hands. Anybody? Anybody? Okay, awesome. All right. Now, the rule of 72 is a rule that determines, okay, how quick your money's going to double based on the interest rate. Okay. So the rule of 72 says any interest rate divided into 72 is going to determine how long it takes for the principal to double. I'm going to say that one more time. Any interest rate divided into 72 is going to determine how long it takes for the interest to double. All right. So here we've got four 29-year-olds. All right. And they all start off with $10,000 or 10,000 seeds. All right. And these four gentlemen all have different soil. One's got a 1% interest rate, one's got a 4%, one's got an 8%, one's got a 10%. All right. Now, let's start with the person with 4%. 4 goes into 72 18 times. Therefore, every 18 years, this 29-year-old's money is going to double. 29 to 47, 10 goes to 20,000, 47 to 65, another 18 years later, 20,000 goes to 40,000. All right? Can we grow wealth, okay, at a 4% interest rate, okay, with a $10,000 start? Not really, all right? Because it's taking us 18 years for our money to double. Now, this is the power and the beauty, though, of something called compounded interest. In fact, Albert Einstein said, those who understand it earn it, those who don't pay it. All right. And we just talked about on one of our calls the other day, okay, how this could work in reverse. Okay, as a disadvantage, there's people with crazy, APRs on their credit cards. Okay, they're paying 20 and 40% interest rates these days on their credit cards because those who don't understand it pay it. Those who do earn it. Now let's look at the gentleman at a 10% interest rate. 10 goes into 72, 7.2 times. Therefore, every 7 years, all right, this $10,000 is going to double. 29 to 36 is 20,000, 36 to 43, 40, 43 to 50, 80, 50 to 57, 160, 57 to 65. I got a nest egg of about $320,000. Not bad. Let me tell you guys why that's not bad. Because the average median for retirees with 401ks is $87,000. Yes. Please write that fun fact down. Okay. It's important to know because we are dealing with a group of Americans who are just kind of being, moved into these 401k products, right? Not realizing there's a lot of life between the time that I start this 401k and when I retire. And most 401ks and 403bs are being converted into emergency funds. Therefore, by the time the person retires with the 401k or the 403b, okay, the 403b did not serve the purpose for retirement. The average American's retiring with about $87,000, you guys, in their 401ks. Okay, so at 10% interest rate. Now, I can hear somebody on the call, somebody's wheels turning. They're saying, well, where do I get a 10% interest rate? Great question, right? Great question. Why is that such a great question? Because there's three ways that your money grows. All right. Your money's going to grow fixed, variable, or indexed. Please write that down. Those are the only three ways that money grows. All right. And this fixed portion, Okay, it's what most Americans have been used to. This is where our banking systems have got most of our money at a 0.02% interest rate. Okay. Now, if you got a bank like a Federal Credit Union or something like that, and your money's in a CD, maybe you can get about 3 to 4% interest. Okay. But we're going to talk about something called inflation here a little bit later. All right. And we're going to see why even that is not the best deal at the table. All right. So, 0.02% interest rate at the fixed income, the fixed growth space. That middle column variables, this is where our typical 401ks and 403bs live, right? Market goes up, our money goes up, market goes down, so does our income. Okay. Now, the dangerous part about this, I like to use the words of Warren Buffett, the GOAT of investing. He said, okay, the two golden rules to investing is, okay, never lose money. Rule number one. Rule number two, never forget rule number one. He also went on to say, as long as there are index strategies available to the average American's money does not belong in the variable markets. Why is that? Okay, 2008, okay, I lost my home and I lost all the money in two of my 403bs. Had no idea as a 27-year-old new homeowner, okay, that it was all connected to the market. They told me I was upside down on my house. I said, when was I upside up? I had no idea what these people were talking about. But because my 403bs and my home was in a variable market, okay, not free from market volatility, okay, when the market took a dive, so did my retirement plan. There are people who were 2 years from retiring, 1 year from retiring, okay, when COVID 19 happened. There were people 2 years from retiring, 1 year from retiring when 9/11 happened. My point, you guys, is okay, the variable markets are not for the average American. Well, what is for the average American? We're talking indexing. How does indexing work? As you can see in that red line, when the market goes up, so does your money. But when the market goes down, your money stays on that even keel, waiting for the market to go back up again. You're going to catch what we call market rebound, and then your money's going to grow, okay, again with the market. Your money only participates in the upside of the market. You say, well, Suni, how's that possible? It's called point to point indexing. Today is February 3rd, 2026. All right. If you put your money into an index strategy today, okay, they're going to retroactively look at what the market did at February 3rd, 2027. If the market did 10%, okay, we're going to retroactively interest credit your account that those gains in the market and then start a new contract point to point. Now, let's say the market did negative 10%. Okay. Well, if we retroactively look at the market and see that it did negative 10%, well, you don't gain any money that year, but you also don't lose anything because your money wasn't actually in the market. It was only mirroring the market. It was only reflecting the market. It was only waiting for the market. Your money's literally on the sideline saying, hey, I'll participate when you start winning. Okay. But as long as you're down, I'm going to stay over here on the sideline. Okay. And this is how we're able to protect and grow money for the average American. All right. It's a beautiful thing. It's called indexing. All right. Now, during the 2008 housing market crash, something very interesting happened. The federal government ended up bailing banks and the banking systems out, okay, using life insurance carrier money. Okay, those of you who don't know that, please look it up. Okay, there were life insurance carriers the federal government borrowed from to bail the banks out. But they also created stipulations that told banks, listen, real estate used to be the top tier investment for banks. all over the country, in fact, all over the world. But after the housing market crash, the federal government mandated that they find another top tier investment. Anybody want to guess what that is? It's called BOLI, bank owned life insurance. Very interesting. When your major financial institutions in the billions of dollars are investing in something called life insurance, cash value life insurance, that's called a clue. Bank of America holds about $24 billion in cash value life insurance, you guys. Wells Fargo holds about $19 billion in cash value life insurance. JP Morgan holds about $12 billion. PNC, 10 billion with a B. Truist Bank, 7 billion with a B. But here's the interesting part, and this is the question that I want you all to ponder. Before, when banks were invested in real estate, is it safe to say that banks could do with my money things that I could not if I was not in the real estate space? Yes or yes? Absolutely. But now that banks are doing something with my money that I can too do, like invest in life insurance, what is the primary purpose of a traditional banking institution? All right, I'll leave that there. Okay. Now let's talk about inflation. All right. Are prices going up or is the value of your dollar going down? Okay. I don't know if you guys, have a mom like mine, but every time she goes to Sam's or to the grocery store, she comes back and she's saying how expensive things have gotten. Oh my God, eggs are so expensive these days. Oh my God, the milk is so expensive these days. Oh my God, right? I don't know if you guys have a mom like mine, but if you don't, hey, that's fine too. But there are a lot of Americans who don't have financial literacy and they believe that things have gotten expensive when the truth is the value of the dollar has decreased. In fact, for the last 10 years, the inflation rate has been 2.91%. The value of your dollar decreases annually on an average of about 3%. So here's the caveat. Why is it important for us to understand inflation as it pertains to wealth accumulation and wealth creation? Because if my money doesn't grow at a rate that supersedes the inflation rate, it's safe to say I'm losing money. Now, here's the trickery. I may not look like I'm losing money on paper. See, I could have had $1 million in the bank, okay, just sitting there in a checking account, or let's say a savings account, okay. Over the last 10 years, I've literally lost about $300,000 in value. I've lost about 30% of my money's value over a 10-year period. But on paper, it still says I have $1 million. And this is why financial literacy is so important. Okay, because you have to understand how to beat inflation. Okay, and if we don't understand how to beat inflation based on a rate of return, we cannot grow wealth. Okay, so how's your money taxed? Let's talk taxes. So we talked about time, we talked about working capital, we talked about rate of return in regards to the rule of 72. We talked about inflation. Let's talk about taxes. You guys, it's only three ways that your money's taxed: tax now, tax deferred, or what we like to call tax advantaged. Okay. The red bucket is where you kind of want to stay away from. All right. Mutual fund, stock, CDs, and savings accounts. Okay. Especially after learning what you've learned tonight. Now, tax deferred. This is where your 401ks, IRAs, annuities, and 403bs exist. Here's the question I want you all to ponder. Okay. In a 401k, a traditional IRA, okay, an annuity and a 403b, the caveat is I get to grow my money tax deferred. Yes, that's what they all told us when we started to participate in these saving strategies. But let me ask you guys a very important question. Are taxes more likely to decrease or increase? Taxes are more likely to increase, right? So if I'm 25 years old, it's 2026, I get the job of my life, it's a career path for me. I'm making good money. I'm going to retire here. and I start a 401k, and they say, hey, we're going to tax defer your money in this 401k, is it safe to say that I'm paying more taxes at distribution in 2050 in regards to paying taxes on my money now? Okay? I want you guys to think about this. See, the name of the wealth game is pay today's taxes on tomorrow's distributions. And this is where the tax advantage bucket becomes the golden egg. Why is that? As you guys can see, the Roth IRA, okay, and life insurance can tax advantage your money. It's like a magic trick. I put money today into a Roth IRA or a cash value life insurance strategy, and like that, my money goes from being a pre tax dollar to a post tax dollar. So upon distribution, okay, I am no longer taxed on those distributions. It is absolutely phenomenal. Now, at the same time, okay, please write this down. There's only two places in the entire United States tax code, okay, where this is possible. All right. And it is a Roth IRA and life insurance policy. But why? Because inside of a genuine life insurance contract, especially when it's attached to money that's growing in the market. The money that's growing in the market cannot be classified as gross income. Therefore, it cannot be taxed. The principal, okay? It cannot be taxed. All right? So, this is an amazing loophole that wealthy people have been leveraging for hundreds of years under the umbrella of life insurance. Now, a Roth IRA, here's the beautiful thing about the life insurance versus the Roth IRA. The Roth IRA, there's an annual limit. Okay? You cap, right, at the Roth IRA, okay, in regards to how much you can contribute every year. So we can't grow wealth inside of the Roth IRA. But under the umbrella of the life insurance policy, okay, there's a lot more room for us to put way more money into this vehicle before we are capped at what's called a MEC, a modified endowment contract, which is another conversation for later. All right. So I'm going to wrap this up real quick, you guys. The wealth formula strategy. So we talked about, okay, uh, time plus rate of return, plus working capital plus rate of return minus taxes and inflation equals wealth. But let's look at this in real time. All right. What is a wealth formula strategy? What would that look like in real time? Okay. The reason that most people would even put something like this in place is for three reasons. Okay. In the event of dying too soon, becoming ill, or living too long. All right. We are looking to create an asset that protects us from life's woes, right? From lifing, as the young people like to say. Okay. Your greatest asset is your ability to produce an income, but your second greatest asset is how well you can protect it. As I mentioned earlier, you guys, a job is a good place to start, but it's not a good place to finish. The name of the game, the wealth game, is to take a percentage of our income and convert it into working capital so then we can then translate that into wealth. All right. So, how do we do that? What does that look like? So here is, okay, the wealth formula wrapped up in one strategy called an index universal life insurance policy. All right. To the right, you can see time, capital, rate of return, taxes, and inflation. All right. This is an actual strategy that I put in place for my 26-year-old, now 26-year-old son. His name is Tyler Andrew Hampton. All right. Now, Tyler, when we put this in place, my wife and I, okay, from a standpoint of time or what we call a funding period, okay, because he's Mr. Start Early in this scenario. So for 20 years, okay, we're going to fund this strategy. After the 20-year period, we're going to allow time to grow and compound the interest. All right. We start this off at $156 a month. That's the capital that we're putting to work. Okay, the rate of return when we put this policy in place on the low end was 6.42%, on the high end average was 15.88%. Okay, now that is also beating inflation, which is 2.9%. And because it's attached to a genuine life insurance contract, it is tax advantaged. Okay, so $156 a month gets my son about a $500,000 in death benefit. And as you guys can see here, all right, by the time he's 69 years old, he'll have grown a nest egg of about $730,000. By the time he's 84, God forbid anything happens to him before that, or in the event that he does not access the funds, but the growth potential is about $1.9 million at 84 years old. All right, so this index strategy is the wealth formula in action. Okay. The growth of an investment account tied to a genuine life insurance policy cannot be classified as income, therefore, it cannot be taxed. Unlike your 401k, you guys, you can loan against your money void of taxes and penalties inside of an index strategy. All right. 15% average rate of return over the last 20 years, okay, under the US Paysetter, 8% in the S&P 500. All right, so again, okay, you got compounded interest, point to point indexing, right? And your money inside of this index strategy only participates in the gains. It never loses. All right. So although we're no longer investing after the 20-year funding period, all right, the cash value continues to grow no matter what. All right. Again, you guys, in 2008, okay, the housing market crashed. All right. A lot of people lost money. Okay. I was one of them. COVID-19 happened in 2020. Okay. In both 2008 and 2020. If you were in an index strategy, if I was in an index strategy, okay, I wouldn't have gained anything, but I would not have lost a penny. All right. So, who qualifies to work with us? If you guys were invited by someone here on the call tonight, if this is your first time seeing this, okay, we're all licensed professionals, okay, qualified to work with anyone. We can customize a strategy, you guys, that works for you. There's no cookie cutter strategies here, okay, but we can customize a strategy that works for you. So, you get back with the person who invited you, okay, they're going to do something with you called a financial needs analysis, and they're going to customize your strategy according to your goals, okay, and your financial objectives. All right. And then after that, we meet with our clients, you guys, every 6 months to guide and coach them to their financial goals. Okay. And hopefully that's you. All right. So, you guys, the secret is out. All right. The wealth formula used to be what we called the wealthy's best kept secret, but we are making it our business, you guys, to make sure that everybody knows about this strategy. All right. In this formula. So, with that said, you guys, okay, I am going to open this up. Okay. And for any of you guys, was this valuable? Put a one in the chat if you guys feel like this was valuable information. If you received any value from this, okay. Also, too, in the event, you guys, that you have any questions about this, we're gonna open it up for about 4 minutes. Any comments or any questions? Anybody, please don't be shy.
Hey, Suni, I want to say first, thank you for just letting us join your team and see this. This has been fantastic, amazing. I don't want to spend much more time saying that because there may be others that want to speak, but truly, honestly, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, brother, man. Anytime, Bob. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Glad to have you guys on. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any comments? Anybody get any value from this?
Yeah, thanks, Suni, and good evening, everyone. My name is Kimry.
Good evening.
Yeah, this was definitely breathtaking and life changing.
Yes,
I'd
sir.
like to know is the information, I guess, would be in our back office to reinforce the information.
It's not in the back office. Mr. Wright. But we're here every Tuesday night, brother. I suggest that, you just come, put a pen to a pad, and really, really dial in on this information. That's how I got this information. It was just something that one of my mentors trained, and I was always kind of there. I took the information and I packaged it for us here in OIC and for our team. And so you're more than welcome to come here, bring a guest, bring a potential client, let them see this information, right? And then transition them into a solution. But you will not find this in the OIC back office.
Okay, it's no problem. I'll be here.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
so much.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, we got about 2 more minutes. Anybody else before we wrap up? All right, you guys. Well, I appreciate everybody for coming. And again, as I mentioned, so next week it may be a different presenter. All right. But we're always here, you guys, every Tuesday night. Please dial in, and don't be a one timer. And what I mean by that is, come back, right? Keep coming back, keep getting the information because we want you guys to have this dialed in because we really feel like this is a great way to transition a client, right? Or someone who really needs the solutions that we have to offer, right? Into a solution for them and their families. With that said, it's been a plum pleasing pleasure. My name is Suni Samad. I will see you guys on the next call. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Suni.
Thank you.
Absolutely.